In the eastern portion of Yosemite National Park, a single formation rises above the surrounding ridgelines. Half Dome stands at 8,839 feet above sea level. From the valley floor, it appears cut cleanly on one side, its northwest face nearly vertical. The granite surface reflects light differently throughout the day, pale in the morning and muted by afternoon shadow. The dome was shaped by uplift and glacial erosion. Over time, ice carved away the surrounding rock, leaving the exposed monolith. Its summit is rounded and broad, though from below it appears narrow and severe. The scale is difficult to measure from a distance. Only when seen beside trees or people does its size become clear. A trail leads upward from the valley, gaining more than 4,800 feet in elevation. The final section consists of steel cables bolted into the granite in 1919, designed to assist hikers across the steep upper slope. During summer months, hundreds of visitors ascend in a single day. The climb requires endurance but no technical climbing equipment. At the summit, the air is thinner and wind moves freely across open stone. There are no trees at the top. No shelter. Only exposed rock and sky. The route to the summit developed gradually over decades. By the late 19th century, visitors to the valley were already attempting the climb. In 1875, a wooden ladder system was installed to assist the steepest section. That structure was later replaced. In 1919, steel cables were anchored directly into the granite, forming the system that remains in use today. Metal stanchions support the cables, allowing them to be raised each hiking season and removed during winter. The ascent became one of the most recognized day hikes in the United States. It required physical effort but no ropes or harnesses. With preparation, many visitors considered it achievable. By the early 2000s, increasing attendance in the park placed pressure on the trail. On peak summer days, several hundred hikers could be on the upper slopes at once. Congestion formed near the subdome and along the cables. Weather in the Sierra Nevada follows a seasonal rhythm. Summer mornings are often clear. By afternoon, convective heating can produce thunderstorms. Moist air rising from lower elevations condenses as it cools. Clouds build quickly. Lightning is common during these systems, especially in July and August. The summit of Half Dome, standing well above surrounding terrain, is fully exposed when storms move across the range. Warnings about afternoon storms are routine. Rangers advise hikers to begin before sunrise and to avoid the cables if clouds begin forming. The exposed granite provides no natural protection from electrical activity. The cables themselves, though essential for balance, are metal conductors fixed into stone. In July 2011, visitation was high. It was a typical summer week. Among the hikers that day were visitors from different parts of California and beyond. Some were experienced outdoors people. Others were completing the climb for the first time. They carried water, light food, and basic rain shells. The ascent was expected to take most of the day. Weather forecasts had indicated the possibility of thunderstorms in the afternoon. Such forecasts were not unusual for midsummer. Many hikers had seen similar predictions before. In mountain environments, storms sometimes pass at a distance. Clear mornings can create a sense of stability. The climb begins in forested terrain, following the Mist Trail or the John Muir Trail before branching toward the subdome. The early miles pass waterfalls and shaded switchbacks. As elevation increases, trees thin. Granite replaces soil. The subdome consists of steep stone steps carved directly into rock, leading to the base of the cables. By late morning on that July day, hikers were already moving up and down the cable section. The system functions with two parallel cables and wooden boards spaced along the route for footing. Participants grip the cables for support, leaning forward as they climb. Descending hikers move simultaneously in the opposite direction. The design depends on cooperation and steady movement. The summit itself offers wide views of the surrounding wilderness, glacial valleys, distant peaks, and layered ridgelines extending toward the Sierra crest. It can feel detached from the valley below. Sound carries differently at that height. Wind replaces the noise of water and trees. For many, reaching the top marks the completion of a long-held goal. Photographs are taken. Food is shared. Rest is brief. The descent requires as much focus as the climb. On that afternoon, the first visible clouds formed beyond the western horizon. At lower elevations they appeared distant and slow-moving. At higher elevation their growth was more apparent. By early afternoon on July 27, 2011, cloud development over the Sierra Nevada had accelerated. Warm air rising from the valley floor met cooler air at higher elevation. Vertical columns formed quickly. What had appeared earlier as scattered buildup became a concentrated system moving toward the central region of Yosemite National Park. From the summit of Half Dome, the change was visible. The sky shifted from pale blue to a muted gray. Wind increased across the exposed granite. There is no tree cover at the top, no depression in the stone deep enough to provide shelter. The dome rises above surrounding ridges, making it one of the highest exposed points in the immediate area. Thunderstorms in the Sierra can form and arrive within a short span of time. Lightning often precedes rainfall. The National Weather Service had forecast possible afternoon storms. Such forecasts are common during midsummer. For hikers already near the summit, descent requires time and patience. The cable section allows only controlled movement. When wet, the granite surface becomes more difficult to navigate. As the first distant thunder was heard, some hikers began to move downward. Others remained near the summit, gauging distance by sound alone. In mountain terrain, echoes can distort perception. A storm that seems several miles away can close quickly. Rain began lightly, then intensified. The granite surface darkened as water spread across it. The steel cables, fixed by metal posts drilled into stone, became slick. Footing narrowed. Gloves, used for grip, absorbed moisture. Lightning followed. Strikes occurred in the surrounding high country. The dome stood fully exposed beneath a thickening cloud ceiling. For those on the cables, retreat meant descending along a steep incline while holding conductive metal in an electrical storm. For those at the summit, there was no higher ground to move away from. Isolation was no longer defined by distance from the valley. It was defined by exposure to the sky. Rain fell steadily across the upper slope. Water moved in thin sheets over the granite surface, following shallow depressions worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. The angle of the final ascent averages more than 45 degrees. When dry, friction between boot soles and stone provides stability. When wet, that friction decreases. The cable route consists of two steel lines running parallel from base to summit, supported by metal stanchions anchored directly into the rock. Wooden boards are spaced at intervals to provide footing. Hikers position themselves between the cables, gripping one in each hand as they ascend or descend. The system depends on balance and steady movement. It was not designed as lightning protection. It was designed for traction. By mid-afternoon, several dozen people were on or near the cables. Some had already begun descending at the first sign of thunder. Others were midway up. Movement slowed as rain increased. The granite darkened further. Water pooled in shallow grooves. Shoes slipped and were corrected. Hands tightened around steel. Lightning in high alpine terrain follows conductive pathways. The summit of Half Dome is not the tallest point in the Sierra Nevada, but it is isolated and prominent. When charged air builds between cloud and ground, elevated features become potential strike targets. Metal structures fixed to exposed rock do not attract lightning in isolation, but they provide efficient conduction if a strike occurs nearby or directly overhead. As thunder moved closer, hikers continued downward in a controlled sequence. The route does not allow rapid evacuation. Only one or two people can pass a given section at a time. Congestion formed in narrow stretches. Some individuals crouched briefly against the rock, attempting to minimize exposure while waiting their turn to descend. Wind intensified. Rain shifted from steady fall to bursts driven sideways across the slope. Visibility shortened. Conversations were brief and functional. Most communication centered on footing and spacing. There is no documented evidence of panic during the early phase of the storm. The primary response was movement downward. At approximately 2:30 p.m., lightning struck the summit area. Witness accounts later described a flash and an immediate shock wave. The strike was close enough to travel through the granite surface and along conductive elements. Several individuals near the top of the cables were knocked off their feet. Others reported temporary numbness or disorientation. 2 hikers, later identified as Stephen Romeo and Ashley Pigeon, were positioned near the upper section of the route. Both sustained direct or ground current lightning injuries. Additional hikers experienced burns, muscle trauma, or brief loss of consciousness. Lightning injuries vary widely. Some individuals recover quickly, others suffer cardiac or neurological disruption. The rain did not stop immediately after the strike. Thunder continued across the valley. Those who remained standing focused on descent. Hikers assisted one another where possible, guiding those who appeared unstable toward the wooden planks. The cables, wet and cold, remained the only fixed support. Park rangers stationed below the subdome were alerted through reports carried down by descending hikers. Communication from the summit is limited. Cellular service is inconsistent. Information traveled physically, person to person, down the trail. As the storm cell moved eastward, rainfall began to lessen. Lightning strikes grew more distant. By the time the last individuals cleared the cable section, the most intense phase had passed. Several injured hikers were now positioned on the subdome or along the upper trail, receiving initial assistance from bystanders. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation was attempted on at least one victim at the scene. In lightning incidents, immediate response can be decisive. Electrical shock can stop the heart while leaving the body without external trauma. Unlike other environmental hazards, lightning victims do not carry residual charge. It is safe to touch them immediately after a strike. Search and rescue operations in Yosemite follow established protocols. Rangers trained in emergency medical response began ascending toward the incident area as soon as conditions allowed safe movement. Helicopter extraction in thunderstorms is restricted by visibility and turbulence. Ground evacuation was the initial method. The trail from the subdome to the valley spans several miles and significant elevation loss. Injured hikers were stabilized before transport. Some were able to walk with assistance. Others required litter carries. The process was deliberate. Weather remained unstable in surrounding ridges, though the primary cell had moved on. In total, several individuals were injured in the July 27, 2011 incident. 2 fatalities were confirmed. Official reports later classified the event as a lightning strike occurring during a forecasted thunderstorm. The cables were not structurally damaged, but their presence underscored the exposure inherent to the route. The climb to Half Dome had long been considered strenuous but manageable. The addition of metal cables in 1919 made the final ascent accessible to non-technical hikers. That accessibility also concentrated large numbers of people on a single exposed feature during peak season. When storms developed, evacuation required time measured in minutes and distance measured in vertical feet. In the days following the strike, park officials reiterated standard safety guidance. Begin early, monitor weather continuously, and abandon the summit attempt at the first sign of thunderheads. In mountain environments, visual clarity at lower elevation does not guarantee stability above. The granite of Half Dome holds little evidence of individual storms. Rain dries. Footprints fade. The cables are lowered each winter and raised again in late spring. The physical structure remains largely unchanged from its early 20th century design. Yet the events of July 2011 became part of its documented history. On the afternoon of the strike, as clouds thinned and light returned gradually across the upper slope, the summit appeared as it had in the morning. The difference lay in the human toll recorded below. When the primary storm cell passed beyond the eastern ridges, the summit area grew quieter. Rain diminished to scattered drops. Thunder moved farther into the distance. The granite surface remained wet, reflecting muted light through a thinning cloud layer. On the upper section of the cables, the effects of the lightning strike were immediate and uneven. Some hikers who had been gripping the steel reported an intense electrical surge that traveled through their arms and legs. Others described being thrown backward by the force of the blast. The variability of lightning injuries depends on proximity, grounding, and the path of current across or through the body. Stephen Romeo and Ashley Pigeon were among those most severely affected. Both sustained catastrophic injuries consistent with a high-energy electrical strike. Immediate resuscitation efforts were initiated by nearby hikers trained in basic life support. In lightning events, the heart and respiratory system are often disrupted simultaneously. Survival depends on rapid restoration of breathing and circulation. Despite those efforts, both individuals were pronounced deceased. Official confirmation followed after recovery operations were completed. Their deaths marked one of the most serious lightning-related incidents on the formation in recent years. Additional hikers were treated for burns, temporary paralysis, and neurological symptoms. Some experienced memory gaps surrounding the moment of impact. Others reported persistent ringing in the ears or muscular pain. Lightning can cause both direct strike injuries and ground current effects, where electrical energy spreads outward through rock and soil. As news of the fatalities traveled down the trail, the mood among descending hikers shifted. Accounts later described silence along portions of the route. Movement became orderly and subdued. There was no immediate public announcement at the summit. Information circulated gradually as individuals encountered rangers and emergency personnel below. Search and rescue teams coordinated evacuation under improved weather conditions. Helicopter support was used once wind and visibility permitted safe approach. The terrain required careful staging. Litter teams moved deliberately across exposed granite and steep stone steps. The park temporarily halted further ascent while response operations continued. Rangers documented positions, weather timing, and witness statements for official reporting. Lightning activity in Yosemite is monitored seasonally, but individual strikes remain difficult to predict with precision. In the aftermath, the physical signs of the event were limited. There were no burn scars etched visibly into the broad summit. The cables remained intact. The granite dome showed no permanent mark identifiable to casual observers. The losses were recorded instead in incident logs and medical reports. For those present, the event altered perception of a climb often regarded as routine. For the park, it reinforced long-standing warnings about afternoon storms and exposed alpine terrain. By evening, the trail reopened under standard conditions. The formation stood unchanged against the darkening sky. Recovery operations continued into the late afternoon and early evening of July 27, 2011. Once the storm system had moved beyond the immediate area, park authorities coordinated transport from the upper slopes of Half Dome down toward the valley floor. Ground teams managed sections of steep trail where footing remained slick from rainfall. Helicopter assistance was introduced when wind conditions stabilized. Injured hikers were transferred to medical facilities for further evaluation. Lightning injuries often require monitoring for delayed neurological or cardiac effects. Some individuals were released after treatment. Others required extended observation. Official statements later confirmed 2 fatalities and multiple injuries resulting from the strike. Park officials reiterated that thunderstorms had been forecast that day. Rangers had issued standard advisories regarding early starts and avoidance of exposed terrain during developing storms. The formation itself remained open following the response, though temporary restrictions were applied while rescue teams completed their work. Media coverage documented the incident briefly, focusing on the unpredictability of alpine weather and the risks associated with high-elevation exposure. The cable system, in place since 1919, was not altered as a direct result of the event. However, discussions surrounding visitor capacity and weather awareness continued in subsequent seasons. As evening settled over Yosemite National Park, clouds thinned across the Sierra crest. The granite surface dried gradually. By nightfall, the summit appeared unchanged. The trail below returned to its usual rhythm. The events of July 27, 2011 entered the documented history of Half Dome as a reminder rather than an anomaly. Lightning has long been part of the summer pattern in the Sierra Nevada. Granite summits, exposed ridgelines, and isolated high points remain vulnerable during convective storms. In the years that followed, Yosemite National Park continued refining its permit system for the Half Dome cables. Visitor numbers were limited more strictly to reduce congestion on the upper route. Rangers emphasized earlier departure times and reinforced guidance to abandon the climb at the first sound of thunder. The dome itself did not change. Its elevation remained 8,839 feet. The cables were lowered each winter and raised again in spring. Hikers returned each season, drawn by the same ascent. The warning signs were never hidden. Weather forecasts were available. Cloud formation was visible. Thunder was audible before the strike. In alpine terrain, decisions are often measured in minutes. Exposure is absolute. Stone does not offer shelter from the sky. The formation stands as it always has, silent above the valley, indifferent to those who climb it.